History is one of the most important subjects to study. And it's not that the information is all that important, right? Knowing how many people died in a battle, knowing who the leader of what country was during what time, those are facts. Those can be useful for a regular conversation if you want to sound smart. But it doesn't lead to a whole lot of practical wisdom, actionable advice. But the lessons that you take away from history, that is where the value is when it comes to studying history. But more on that in a moment. Hello friends, my name is Michael McCauley. You are listening to Biocast Addendum, where we make sense of the chaotic past. This episode goes in tandem with the Leon Trotsky Biocast episode. I strongly encourage you to listen to that before listening to this episode. A link to that will be in the description or the show notes. But without any further ado, let's get right in to the episode. So the first big lesson from Trotsky's life is that you will reap what you sow. Now, putting this into context, Leon Trotsky was a communist. He was a revolutionary that brought about the first communist state in Russia. He spent just about all of his adult life working toward this revolution, undermining the Tsarist regime, and really planting the seeds that would eventually become the Soviet Union. Now, some of that was good. Let's not be completely biased here. Let's have kind of an objective stance and acknowledge that there were some merits to the things that Leon Trotsky was arguing for. Equality. Not having some ruling class rule just because, hey, well, my dad was the ruler, so I should be in charge now too. There were some good things that Leon Trotsky argued for. But here was the thing. There was a lot more bad than there was good. And one of the big examples that I immediately think of is how when he was the commissar to the Red Army, basically in charge of the military, he had ordered the Red Army to commit war crimes against civilians. I mean, there was one particular occasion where I believe it was Estonia, and they were very resistant to the communist rule. And he wrote to one of the Red Army commanders, and he basically said, listen, man, if they don't want communism, just start killing the rich people. Kill 100 to 1,000 of them. That'll be fine. And that'll teach them their lesson. And then they're going to live under our rule, under our thumb. And that's how we solve that problem. And it's just so tragic because, you sit back and you really think, these people, that's 1,000 people who had their lives taken away from them. And especially, these were people that had something to lose, right? He encouraged the officers to kill and commit atrocities against the wealthy people. They weren't going around attacking poor people. They were already, right, they're miserable enough. They don't need to be, suffering anymore. But let's just go and kill the poor, the wealthier people. That's just horrendous. And there was no justice. The idea that you could just go into a village and you just decide to massacre a whole bunch of people that look wealthy. It's a horrible thing. And then you realize that, Trotsky eventually got exiled from his own country. He had to spend he spent a good chunk of his life all over in France, in Turkey, Norway, Mexico. And the only reason that happened was because, he got exiled. There was a propaganda campaign against him. And the same bureaucratic nightmare machine that he helped create eventually turned the gun back at him. So he eventually had to reap what he sowed. He didn't allow justice and due process for those people that were resistant to the communist rule. They had war crimes against them. They had atrocities committed against them, their lives threatened, their families slaughtered. And what happened eventually was Trotsky had to face that same wrath. He had to face that same wrath. So I'm not necessarily a big believer in karma or whatever, but I think that's a really good example where sometimes it really does exist. It really does, and it can come back to bite you in the butt. And, again, just don't commit war crimes against civilians, right? Hopefully in the 21st century we understand that lesson. Anyway, moving on. So the ends don't justify the means. And I think this is one of the most important lessons that I don't think a lot of people really hit on, because it seems almost self-evident, right? But I think in practice, so many people get caught up in, well, listen, I can bring about this much good change, this much positive outcome if I just do this little immoral thing here. But sometimes you end up being very counterproductive. Now, I can admire people that are utopian in their ideals, right? If people want to bring about some kind of socialist utopia, communist utopia, whatever it may be, right? We can say, all right, your theories are okay, your thinking is okay, because let's be fair, a lot of these guys were pretty smart thinkers. But the problem is that, listen, we want this utopia, we're going to kill people to get there. We're going to kill people to get to heaven. And you see, the problem with that is eventually you just keep killing people. You cannot bring about positive change with such horrible negative actions. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. I mean, look at today, right? Now, there were a lot of communist revolutionaries that were very well-meaning, well-intentioned, that really wanted to liberate the working class, bring about a global utopia for everyone on Earth. Right? I mean, I think if we could all live in the world that Karl Marx and these other guys envisioned, I think we could all agree like that would be a pretty nice thing. Everyone is equal. Everyone is peaceful. There are no wars, no exploitation, no monarchs that just rule for no reason and oppress people, and colonization and all of these horrible things. We can acknowledge that would be a nice world to live in. But you cannot escape that world by doing the exact same horrible things that those people do. Right? I mean, just think about the way Communist Russia attacked Great Britain and said, you colonial power, you're exploiting wealth from all of these poor nations, of these inferior peoples who don't have the technological means to fight against you. How horrible of you, how dare you? And then what did the Soviet Union do? Well, they basically took over a bunch of their neighbors and installed puppet states. I mean, that's the same thing as colonization. I mean, where do you think all of the wealth in Germany went after the Second World War? I mean, well, half of it got stolen by America and Great Britain, but I mean, a big chunk of it was stolen by the Soviet Union. I mean, trillions of dollars in wealth and inventions and all this stuff. Scientists, and you just can't even fathom how much was stolen. And not just from Germany. I mean, there are a lot of other points that go into that. I mean, just think about all of the other nation states that were Soviet satellite states, right? I mean, Hungary and Poland and Romania and, all of Yugoslavia. I mean, it's just tragic. And no matter how good your intentions might be, if you have to do something immoral to get there, you may as well have bad intentions. You may as well have bad intentions. So just keep that in mind whenever you put any ideas into practice. That's really practical advice. You want to take something away from history? Understand that the ends don't justify the means. Really, really contemplate that one. Moving on. Don't get too sure of yourself. Now, I even mentioned this one in the Biocast episode itself, but I want to expand upon it a little bit because I feel this is just such an important idea. And it's not just something that I've learned from Leon Trotsky, but it's something that has been a recurrent theme throughout every single political extremist that I've studied now on Biocast. Because I've looked at Hitler, I've looked at Stalin, Joseph Goebbels, any of these, I mean, even Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I mean, all of these guys. When people get too sure of themselves, they lose touch with reality, they have an inability to face criticism, to face the truth, and then they end up becoming the bad guys. I don't think that they're being left-wing or right-wing in any capacity necessarily makes you good or bad. But it is your ability to accept criticism, to not attack your ideological opponents, to not fall victim to tribalism and attack them. I mean, that's the real tricky part. And that is the real tricky part because, I mean, look at what's going on in the United States today. I mean, there is a massive divide between right and left-wing thinkers. And it's just tragic because no one is listening to the other side. No one will take a step back and say, you know, all right, listen, I want to hear your argument on this one. I want to think about this point. Maybe you're right on this one. Maybe I'll concede you on that. Like, no one does that. No one does that. And it is a real travesty because we really should. Now, we might not be Nazis or communists or fascists or, you know, whatever other crazy form of political extremism there is. But if we don't start questioning our own ideas as a civilization, there's nothing stopping us from becoming Nazis and communists and fascists. The ability to live and participate in a free society that moves forward, that brings about justice, that changes for the better, that gradually improves every day, is the ability to question our own ideas. Don't get too sure of yourself. No matter how much you may have dedicated to whatever idea that you're fighting for, do not get too sure of yourself. Because there are some solid arguments against you. And if you just listen to them, maybe you'd find out that you don't really believe in that. And I say this from personal experience. There were a whole bunch of political ideas that I had previously clung to. But after taking a step back, looking at the reality of the situation, it's like, oh, whoa, what do you know? The other side has a point. I didn't know everything. And it really is something, you know, it's like a test in humility. Can you admit that you're wrong? And I think we just need more people to operate with that kind of mindset because no one knows everything. If we are going to live in a peaceful, free society where people can openly discuss ideas and new political philosophies, we need to be able to question ourselves. So these were the 3 big lessons from Leon Trotsky's life. Be sure to let me know what you guys think in the comment section. But that is going to be it for the video. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video and I really hope you guys took something away. Because again, history is useless if we don't extract some lessons or some knowledge from the past. That is the most important part. Getting actionable advice from the history that we study. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Follow both of the podcasts, Biocast and Biocast Addendum. This has been Michael McCauley, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.